We're going to go over the research summary template and the template I created for your project proposal. Remember, the research summary template is what you're going to be using as the introduction of your project proposal. This is a tool I created based on some other materials from a really popular book called They Say, I Say that helps researchers and arguers kind of manage a lot of information in a kind of a handy way. Writing these kinds of in this kind of genre is not totally easy. It's not totally intuitive to think about which thing should come first. So the template really helps you think through going from big kind of picture to more specific research focus. So let's go through. There are 7 different elements that your research summary template is going to help you talk about in a pretty small place. Remember, since your proposal only has 500 words that you can use, it's really essential that you get to the specifics as soon as possible. And remember that your audience for a proposal is somebody who's going to give you permission or funding to get you through, get you to be able to start a project. And so you want to be very mindful of their time. So this kind of helps you with that. So the first thing it does is helps you discern between the topic and the problem that you are addressing. So remember, topic is broad, problem is specific. So your topic might be the environment, and the problem you're talking about in the environment might be contaminated groundwater, for example. The second thing it does is addresses the historical or social context. Sometimes there are both. Sometimes there are 2 different. So I want you guys to remember what we talked about with the historical and social context for the rhetorical analysis when you're thinking about this. What's happening around the issue? What happened in the past? What was the situation in the past that maybe started the problem? What kind of new social movements are involved? For example, in the letter from a Birmingham jail, the historical context was the fact that Brown versus Board of Education ended up making segregation illegal in the entire country. But the social context in the South, at any rate, was the idea that black people and white people needed to be separated and wanted to be separated. And we also have the burgeoning civil rights movement that was happening in this social context as well, that was there to fight those historically entrenched ideas. So that's what I mean by that. Defining the broad debate. What do people disagree about with the problem? In other words, we might all recognize something as a problem, but we don't all necessarily agree about the solution. Remember that with the little video I showed you on security from Adam Ruins Everything, everybody agrees that safety and security at the airport is really quite important, and that we want to avoid a problem of not being safe, of terrorist attacks, for example. But not everybody agrees that the TSA's approach is the right solution. So that's where that would come in. Dividing 2 points of view about the problem. We talked about that in the proposal. Remember what people are disagreeing about, or what actions they're thinking. Remember, you don't want to frame this too simply as being for something or against something, but for a solution, for a specific solution. So some people think that the TSA screeners are the best way to prevent terrorist attacks, and other people think that the best way is to increase the number of marshals on airlines, the funding for first responders, and the ability for the CIA and NSA and those kinds of organizations to and the FBI to find terrorists before they're able to strike. That would be an example of that. Identifies related problems or effects of the issue. I'm on number 5 now. Related problems. So one of the things we talked about with TSA, for example, is that while it may be addressing security, personal security, it's also creating personal privacy concerns in addition to maybe making airport waits longer, more unpleasant, spending money on things that may only be addressing part of the issue, things like that. Number 6, assess common value or goal of both sides. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning here, talking about for like the TSA, think about this in terms of creating secure public spaces that go beyond just the airport but into other places. People want to be safe when they go out in public, would be a common value and goal of both sides. And then the primary research question, that's the question that's going to help you kind of go through all of your research material, knowing that your research material has to be able to, in some way, answer a piece of that question. So proposals have questions, they don't have thesis statements. So this is going to be a primary research question that I'm asking you for. So if you look at the proposal down here, you kind of have these blanks or these places where you are able to see something like name topic that's underlined. So that's where a fill-in place would be. Other places you'll see just kind of blank lines. That's where you'll add your own information. So you go from fill-ins to blank. So it kind of goes through. So we can see how these are related. So for example, identifies topic and defines the problem. Number 1, we can see in that first sentence, in discussions about name topic, there's one. A controversy has arisen over name the problem you will address. That's the second half of number 1. So you can see as you're filling through, this issue came to the forefront of the public's attention when, and then there's a place for you to add some context and specific events. You can give more details about that if you like, but you don't have to go into too much detail right here. The debate over the name-specific issue or problem centers on, and then you're going to do number 3, what is the broad debate that you're looking at? From one point of view, and you're going to describe one side, and then from a different perspective, you'll describe the other side. So that one is addressing point number 4 and giving your reasons. Then finally, the debate about name the issue becomes more complex when stakeholders consider related issues or problems. That talks about number 5. And people on both sides of the issue worry that that's number 6, assessing the common values or goals. And then the question remains, there's 7. That's where you state your primary research question. For your primary research question, you can look at the primary research question that your CQ Researcher article is asking as a good example of a question that you can ask. Remember, questions should be framed in a way that you can answer yes, no, or maybe. You want to kind of say should, does, could, is kinds of questions, and avoid how or why questions. How or why questions are going to be pushing you into a different kind of paper. And I want you to be able to frame an argument based on this. So an example of what a research summary template looks like is right here. You can see this is using our physician-assisted suicide issue. You can read that, and you can see how it defines things fairly specifically and gives specific pieces of information, but it doesn't cite the CQ Researcher article because this is pretty general knowledge. These are just ideas rather than specific information. So you can see how that works. Okay, so remember, this will be the introduction of your research, of your project proposal, and you will put your own information in here about your research that you got from your CQ Researcher report.